So welcome everyone. That you are here today, and I'm gonna tell you our approach to measuring product lifespans with our longevity score, because as Alejandro was already saying, responsible sourcing, yes, but that also means that we should source less and not just the same amount or even more, but in a maybe a bit better way. So I'm not sure if all of you know Fairphone, but Fairphone has been founded in 2013, and actually we started as a campaign on conflict minerals. By now in 2020, well now 23, we have launched our fourth Fairphone, which is looking into different, or where different things are improved to have a more sustainable smartphone. And our mission as a company is not only to look at our own smartphones and improving their sustainability, but that we actually want to show that things can be done differently, and that also the whole industry should be motivated to become more responsible in their actions around, producing their IT products or other electronic products. And we do this in 4 areas, and these are our responsible sourcing, our fair materials. We also work with our factories for fairer working conditions, then longevity, what we focus on today, and also taking back and electronic waste, the problems around this. Maybe if you are not part of our industry, you might wonder what it actually really matters, this environmental impact of smartphones, because they look quite small, right? So to give you a few numbers, you can see here that the global ICT footprint in 2020, and you can see that smartphones are 11% of this whole ICT footprint. And up to 2040, it is predicted that the share of global emissions of the ICT sector will increase to up to 14%. And this is really a lot. And so this is already a reason to act and to look into how we can reduce the impact of smartphones in this industry. So what is the problem with smartphones? Mostly people have at least one smartphone, which leads to that around 1.4 billion of them are sold each year. And we usually only use them between 2 and 3 years. And after that, we like to store them, for example, in drawers, or maybe because they are so small and seem a bit unimportant, maybe even discard them in the normal trash, or nobody really knows where they go. But it is only that 20% actually end up in proper recycling. And of that, then also just 30% of the materials in a smartphone can be recovered. So we only get back a tiny amount of the materials that we put into these phones during production. And on the left-hand side, we can see where the materials come from that are in a smartphone, or many of them. And on the right-hand side, we see where they end up. And I think we all agree that this is not how it should be, because we need to be a bit more careful with our resources. So what are we doing about this? As you can see, first we really look into the environmental impact and where these impacts come from our product. And for a smartphone, this is mostly related to the production phase. So about 75% of the emissions that are caused by a smartphone throughout its whole life cycle is caused during the production phase. And what does that now mean exactly if we want to reduce these emissions? Well, basically it means that we need to produce less smartphones. And since of course nobody wants to, not to have a smartphone, we need to use the smartphones that we produce for longer. So basically, if we so far use around 4 smartphones in 10 years, we should try to get it down at least to that every smartphone can be used for 5 years. And with that, it is not completely accurate, but we can about halve the impact that we have by using a smartphone if we keep our smartphones for 5 years instead of, well, let's say 2.7 years. What is the limitation of most smartphones? So there are a few limitations that probably every one of you has already encountered. So for example, that the battery didn't last you for the day anymore. And since most smartphones are not repairable, well, you have to buy a new smartphone, or you start considering if you should repair it, replace the battery, but that's usually also not very easy. Then there are also a lot of standard components used that have a limited durability, which then will break in a certain moment. Or also the software for a smartphone is of course very important. If it is not supported anymore, then your apps will in a certain moment not work anymore, or your phone becomes just very slow. Well, many of us also really like to have the newest technology in the hand. And although the smartphone market is quite mature, many brands imply that there is still a very big advance in the technology, so that a lot of people actually really want to have a newer device because it promises just way more features than the old smartphone. Yeah, and then of course, the costs also of repair, if it is possible at all to repair a smartphone. And that all basically leads to our behavior as a user, who in the end determines if a product is used for longer or if we replace a smartphone with another device. So what do we do at Fairphone? So on the one hand, we have a modular smartphone to make it more longer lasting. So, for example, that you can replace the battery, which is actually not really a repair, but it is more maintenance, because a battery just degrades over time while you're using it, and that's a given. So it is automatically a limit to the life of a phone if you cannot replace it. Then also we make it easy to diagnose, that we also know which module is failing so that it can be replaced if it breaks. And we also offer the ecosystem which is necessary so that you get affordable spare parts and also the information to really repair it yourself without paying someone else for doing that. Also, we offer a long-term software support for at least 5 years. And what we also started with Fairphone 4 is that we give a 5-year manufacturer warranty, so that the user has basically no reason not to repair their phone, because it is just as easy as it can get. So, and this is what the phone looks like from the inside, and also what different repair organizations or the French Repairability Index say about it, because it is really targeted that the user themselves can repair the phone without any professional support. But now, well, we say that we provide this ecosystem around the phone, that a user can do all this themselves, but how do we actually know if the user does it and that this actually leads to a longer lifespan of the phones? Because still, of course, these factors of wanting to have newer technology or other features, that of course also still plays a role. Yeah, so what we tried with our longevity score, or what we're doing, is that we want to measure the lifespan of our products, but that is quite difficult because you cannot really measure completely the lifespan of a product while it is still in the market, because this lifespan or average lifespan is still in the making by the products that are right now being used on the market by the users out there. So what we can actually measure is how old are the phones right now, the ones that have been sold and are in use right now. So basically the actual lifetime that they have right now. And they're, well, these bars here, they basically show the lifetime of a phone. And you can see that Fairphone C here, this one down here, is 1 year old, or has become 1 year old, and then it has stopped being used. But the other two Fairphones, they are still in use. And we can know that, but we cannot look into the future and know how much more lifetime they will accumulate in the future. So this is really impossible to measure today. So we try to get as close to knowing how old they get. And we do this when we first look at the measurable part that we have in our Fairphone backend. We basically receive the signal of each phone and the IMEI number, so that we know that when this phone has been activated. And once a week, we ask to our phones if they are still active. And if the phone responds, when we know, okay, the phone is in use because it has internet access and it has a charged battery. But if the phone does not respond, we say after 30 days, basically after we haven't heard of the phone for 3 weeks, for 4 weeks, that the phone is then declared as inactive, like the orange phone up there in that illustration. So then what do we do with this additionally expected lifetime that lies right now still in the future? So for us, this is something which is very dependent on the attitude of the user towards the device and also the trust in the services of Fairphone, because it is not just about the physical durability of the device, but also about the emotional durability and the experience that the user has of the device and also of the company. And so the only possibility basically is to actually ask the user. And this is what we are doing with another app, which is on our smartphones, the My Fairphone app, where we send out basically a question, a notification after every half year, and ask the user what they think, how much longer they are going to using their phone, knowing how they experience the phone right now at this moment. And this is where we get our data from the additionally expected lifetime of the phone. Then through that, of course, we also know how many phones are still active at this time. And these are actually what you can see here, our results from 2021. Unfortunately, our 2022 results are not finished yet. So, well, we need to take our last year's example here. But we know that on average, our active phones that were around 84%, that they were in this moment on average a bit more than 1 year old, and the inactive phones that were around 16%, they were a bit more than half a year old on average when people stopped using them. And in this share, we are basically acknowledging how many phones are inactive, how many are active, and we are calculating these together to the longevity score. And of course, only the additionally expected lifetime is taken into account for the phones that are still active, because they are the ones that do actually still produce more lifetime that we can count into this average. And like this, we get our longevity score. And this longevity score is basically the closest that you can get to the average lifespan of a product, which is currently still in use. Now, we of course want to know what does that really mean in terms of impact, because we are all about measuring impact and showing or learning about what it really helps if we do this, if we provide this ecosystem, and if we make our phones repairable. So you saw here on the page before that we have 5.5 years of a longevity score, which means that it is more than double as much as the current average lifespan of smartphones, generally speaking, on the market, which is of course great. We are very proud about this. But now just looking at the really measurable data, so we forget about the expected lifespan now, but we are just looking about or on the phones that are really active and how long they have been active if they are inactive. We compare this to the market data. So how many Fairphones are still active in a certain age group compared to how many phones are still active on the market. And you can see here that also for 2021, we had way higher numbers. So of 2-year-old phones on the market, there were in 2020 only 44% of phones active. whereas 81% of the Fairphones were still active. And like that, we can determine basically how many phone years, we call it, we can save through the longer lifetime of the Fairphones. And by that, we can calculate how many phones we are replacing by assuming that the Fairphones that live longer make it unnecessary for people to purchase a new phone. And if they don't purchase more phones, we also need to produce less phones. So this is our assumption behind it. And this is our result, what it leads to. So the environmental impact that we avoid by having a longer lifespan of our Fairphones. So in 2021, we avoided 8 tons of e-waste and 42% of this through the longevity of our phones. So these phones didn't need to be produced. And then also we avoided 560 tons of CO2 equivalents by not needing to produce and transport more smartphones, because our phones live longer and are basically replacing the need for buying another phone. So, well, now I was explaining you about our longevity score, which is a unique metric to measure how you can prolong a product's lifespan. And if you think of that 1.4 billion smartphones are sold each year, then you might think what that means also in terms of impact if the whole industry would do the same. And well, we came to the conclusion that with a rough estimate, we could save every year more than 9 million tons of CO2 equivalent, which is a huge amount and certainly a goal that we should strive for. And well, maybe if you come from a business and listening in here, then my question would be, what does this look like for your products and for your industry? And we plan this year to also publish our methodology on the longevity score, because often when you look into eco ratings, often this idea of lifetime and lifespan of product is discarded because there is no methodology out there to actually measure this lifespan, or there is no metric which is really recognized right now. And we want to change this and want to publish our methodology so that in the future, maybe we can achieve that products can be compared in terms of lifetime, directly related also to the users that are experiencing the product and actual measured data. And so if you are interested in also measuring your own product's lifespans, then I would ask you to get in touch with me. You can see my mail address here. Thank you very much.